This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Char Miller. He is a professor at Pomona College in environmental analysis. And I want to think back to a film from, 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's a Walt Disney film. It's called Bambi.
Yes.
Bambi, in a lot of ways, is a metaphor for so many different things. And you teach Bambi.
I do.
Tell us what you teach about that film.
Well, I use the film to talk about the popular cultural understandings of fire and human beings in the landscape. And there's this classic moment in the film when man first arrives with a gun.
Right.
And
that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But my students were howling because I showed it last night.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic.
And they were cracking up because the narrator says,
right.
It's man.
Right.
Man is in the garden, in effect.
Right.
And man is going to destroy the garden, a la Adam and Eve,
right.
in a sense. And so Disney is using our capacity to use tools, guns, and fire,
right.
as a way to talk about our destructive impulses.
And we think about the West.
Yes.
We think about California and this whole notion of manifest destiny, and the
yes.
land is for humans to exploit. We can get biblical if you
yeah,
like.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
And what we know is over the last 100 years here in California, we have been exploiting the land.
Absolutely.
And as a result of that use, we have been victim to tremendous fire.
Yes.
And fire that over the last few months has taken several lives.
Yes.
And destroyed home and household
yes.
like we've never seen.
Yes.
What are we seeing?
Well, I think part of what we're looking at, and let's use Bambi as a jumping
right.
off point for that, is that our capacity to live in this landscape is actually limited by the landscape's willingness to let us live there.
Well stated.
So if fire or flood, which is related
right.
to fire, reminds us that we can't just live anywhere, and especially in times of intense drought, as we know now, of climate disruption, which we know now, these signals from nature and we don't need Disney to tell us this, although it's always fun to have that.
Right.
These signals from nature are reminding us of the limits of our growth. We're paying no attention to it, but it's signaling
And
us.
let's talk about what those signals are.
Yes.
There are scientists who do believe that this drought is impacted
yes.
by climate change. I think
yes.
8 to 30%,
yes.
something like that.
Yes.
We also know definitively that the drought has caused what's known as a bark beetle
yes.
to just its population explode.
Yes.
So you combine climate change with drought with beetle. What does that equal?
That equals dead forests. Large swaths of dead forest, maybe 10 to 12 million trees in California are thought to be dead, and that number actually is rising as they do more careful analysis of what's taking place. And that doesn't mean that fire is going to start there. What it means that if fire starts there, there's a lot of fuel on the ground to burn through.
And fire has started in some places.
Sure it has.
Fire has started in Butte County. Fire has started, the names of the fires, Lake County,
yes.
the Valley Fire.
Yes.
These fires in September were absolutely historic, unprecedented. They were devastating, and they were unpredictable.
Yes.
And that's what I want to ask you
yes.
about, Professor, is the unpredictability of these, what some are calling fire NATOs.
Yes. So part of the dilemma that we're confronting is that fires are outrunning our capacity to think about them, to fight them, or to run away from them. And unfortunately, as the Lake County fires demonstrated, people died because either they didn't want to leave and wanted to protect their homes with fire hoses or their marijuana stash.
Right, which is another conversation. Lots to discuss.
Or they were too infirm and couldn't get out. Right. And so part of what we have not yet figured out ourselves as a society is how do we deal with the thousands, in fact millions of people who live in the fire zones with new kinds of fires that we had not encountered before, that move at a speed that astonishes us and thus outruns our capacity to save people.
And you talk about people's decision to live
yes.
in certain locations,
yes.
and that begs the question about the whole notion of the West and the whole notion
yes.
of American exceptionalism.
Yes.
And this idea that we have property rights that allow us to live where we want.
Yes.
And we, at the same time, want government to be smaller, and we don't want government to tax us
Yes.
in great sums. We have this fire fee now that's causing tremendous controversy.
Yep.
So there's a real schizophrenia
There is.
that's being presented. How and what do you see in that vein?
Well, solving that schizophrenia will require more than psychotropic drugs.
Right, yes.
At some
Prozac
level.
won't do it.
Prozac won't do this. This requires a different kind of social commitment, a commitment to the Commonwealth, to all of us, to recognize that when you move up to Idlewild or you move up to Wildwood, that you're making a decision that downstream is going to have consequences.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge for Californians is we really are two different states.
Yes.
If not three.
Yes.
And I'm not setting the dividing line north-south.
No.
I'm setting it east-west.
Yes.
I think in a lot of ways that's this division
Sure,
in
the
the
coastal
states.
and inland areas, but then you do it by elevation.
As
The higher up you go or deeper into the canyons you
Right.
get, and I get it, there's a beauty, there's an aesthetic about wanting to live up close into nature, but what there isn't also is a recognition that in doing so, you're putting yourself and firefighters at risk and causing the rest of us to bail you out.
So where do we go from here? What we know today
Yeah.
is that the fires are more fierce, more
Yes.
aggressive, more unpredictable.
Yes.
We also know that you're a scientist. We apparently are on the verge of an El Nino.
Yes?
And the El Nino, we don't know how far north it will go
Right,
in our
exactly.
state. But for argument's sake, it's going to be in Southern California.
Yes.
We're dry. We've
Yes.
had fires.
Yes.
And so what happens when it starts raining, when it's dry and we've had fires?
You're setting up the apocalypse.
Which is?
The apocalypse is huge storms, major mudslides.
And that's what I want to ask you about is the mudslide.
And so the mudslides will demonstrate, if nothing else, the relationship between upstream and downstream, quite literally, but also figuratively, as they roar through the canyons in Pasadena and anywhere else in Southern
Right.
California, in these foothill communities. We're going to see possible destruction like we have never seen. And the really worrisome part is that if this El Nino is anything like the 1915 floods, not
15.
Not 1938,
97?
not 97. If
Okay.
it's anything like 1915, which is 4 times bigger
Okay.
than what we have seen subsequently, then Prado Dam out on the Santa Ana River quite likely will go. That means a good chunk of Orange County will be inundated in ways that no one is
Are
prepared
we talking Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Really?
that would be true for the San Antonio Canyon Dam above Claremont and Upland. These are old dams built in 1930s and 1940s, designed to hold back the big flood of record that they remembered, which is the 38 flood. No one talks about the 1915 flood, and really no one talks about the 1862, which basically put Central Valley underwater for years.
What should we do, sir?
Whoa!
What should we do?
I think
in the
prayer
next 2
comes
months?
into it.
Yeah,
Prayer
back to the
comes
Bible
into,
and Bambi.
Yeah. I think I would be prepped. Totally
What does that
prepped.
mean? What does
It
that look
means
like?
my house is already under a kind of alert that when the winter storms come, and the guess is February, March, and April.
So not so much December.
Not December. The lineup with the moon, I mean, all of this
see.
is dependent upon other natural forces over which we have no control. But I would have my car ready to go with all of the items that I think are absolutely necessary, because there's no way that the agencies can respond in time. They've been focusing on drought.
Right.
And we're now talking about drought to deluge in a snap of a finger. No one's ready for this.
What's the likelihood in your mind that we will face that deluge, that apocalypse, if we can use
The
that
trigger
term?
mechanism is not so much El Nino, it's whether the lows and the highs operate that would allow
The
rains
pressure
to come in,
systems.
the pressure systems to come in or not. And what we've seen for the last 4 years is high pressure has kept the storms to our north. If that high breaks down and the lows can swing in as they have done periodically in September, then I don't want to be here when the atmospheric river blows up, because they call that flood the arc.
His name is Char Miller. He is a professor at Pomona College. I'm Brett Pomerance. It's Charter Local Edition. Thanks.